All right, it's 7 o'clock, everybody. Thanks for joining us. We're going to let folks trickle in, and it is going to be a powerful night. So thank you for carving out some space on a Sunday night to be together. And we got a powerful night lined up. So hold on just a minute as folks trickle in. We got the countdown clock counting down the minutes, and we are at 7 o'clock. I'm Shane Claiborne. I'm sure I don't know all of you, but this evening is brought to you by Red Letter Christians, and we're going to do a special night tonight with Reverend Michael Waters. We've called it Race in America, and I'll tell you a little bit more about it in a second. But I want to tell you this: that if you've got young people, I mean, kids, teenagers, young adults, college students, friends, you should go grab them. You got a few minutes and come in, because this is a night that we're going to hear some stories and object lessons. And I think in the flat Zoom pandemic world, you're not just going to hear words tonight. You're going to see some stuff and hear some stories that will really engage us at a lot of different levels. So it is I want to tell you just a few things on the horizon as folks join us. And first is that tonight is being recorded, and we're going to share it. You'll be able to let people see the video afterwards. So just know that that's happening. It's also free. We're trying to do everything that we can in a way that money is never an obstacle to come to events by Red Letter Christians. But if you can, if you've got some resources and funds, we would love for you to go to redletterchristians.org and donate a little bit. We sure want to show Reverend Michael some love. And so if you can give a few bucks, or some of y'all have been really generous and given 100 or 1,000 bucks, just give what you can. And it keeps us able to do events like what we're doing tonight. A couple other things on the horizon are March 1st. We do morning prayer. So we do morning prayer the first of each month. Jonathan Wilson, Hartgrove, and I moderate that from our book called Common Prayer. And we also have guests every month. So this month we've got Brian Bantam. He and his partner, his wife, Gail Song Bantam, have written a book called Choosing Us, but Brian's also just a rad guy. So he's going to be joining us at 9 o'clock a.m. It's morning prayer. Sorry for y'all out in the West Coast, but 9 o'clock. If you miss it, you can watch it afterwards on, I guess that's Tuesday, on March 1st. So we'll kick off the month, and we're doing it every first of the month this year. So know that that's happening. Couple other things. We've got a faith forum in March. I'm excited about this, y'all. It's going to continue some of the themes we talk about tonight, race in America. We've got Kelly Brown Douglas, who is a legend, and I don't know her well. I can't wait to be with her. And Robert P. Jones, who I do know a little bit. He wrote a book called White Too Long, and we're going to be talking about white discomfort and race in America. That's on March 17th. You'll see all this on our social media, but I'm giving you the heads up, right? And then a couple other things are March 12th, if you're in the Philadelphia area, or you want an excuse for a road trip, we're kind of launching Raw Tools Philly. We've been making tools out of guns. Michael's got one down there in Texas, actually. So we're going to be doing this live in Philly on March 12th. And we've got some of our best crafters, like wood crafters that make the handles out of wood. And we're going to be blacksmithing, and we're going to have a welder buddy of ours making art out of gun parts. So March 12th, all day long, we're making a day of it. We're going to train people in how to decommission guns legally and safely. So if you want your church or synagogue or mosque or community center, or heck, in your basement, if you want to know how to chop guns and get rid of them, we're going to train you into how to do that. And that'll be live streamed too, at least part of the day on March 12th. Okay. Couple other things, and we're going to get to that. It's going to be a great night, y'all. So listen to this. You guys are the first to know. I just got these in the mail. For a bunch of years, we've known friends of mine, the guys that are incarcerated in Tennessee at Unit 2 in Riverbend, which is Tennessee's death row. These are all men on death row sentenced to die. They've painted a series of the Stations of the Cross. And these are, a lot of Christian traditions remember the stages of Jesus's execution. So check this out. This was painted by the men on Tennessee's death row. And I've got 14 more of the Stations of the Cross. and you're the first to really see them. I just got them in the mail. We're going to be announcing that, letting everybody see it. And as we get into, this Wednesday's Ash Wednesday, and as we think about Lent and Easter, we're going to remember Jesus's execution by looking at images that are painted by men that are facing the possibility of their own execution, or they're on death row. And y'all, in Tennessee, there is an execution planned the week after Easter. Lord have mercy. Like, talking about missing the point, right? So like, we're going to be on Easter Sunday in Tennessee, in Nashville. We're going to walk from death row and from the execution chamber to the governor's office. We're going to carry these images. And I think that Easter is one of those times where we remember what Jesus did. And the whole point of Jesus's death and resurrection was to make a spectacle of death, to subvert it, right, with love and forgiveness in an empty tomb. So just know, if you are able to join us in Tennessee on Easter, awesome. If not, then you can join us virtually and just be praying for us. And I'll let you know how you can get access, to these images painted by the guys on death row. So those are just a few things. Listen, tonight's going to be amazing. I want to introduce my friend, my brother, Reverend Michael Waters, down in Texas, joining us tonight. Good to see you, my brother.
Shane, I'm always delighted to be with you, and good evening to all of you. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah. So here's a little bit of the backstory, y'all that are tuning in. I know a lot of you are watching on Facebook or YouTube, and some of y'all are here on Zoom with us. I've been with Michael. We've done a bunch of different stuff together with Vote Common Good. We've done stuff in Texas. We've been marching in DC and doing the good trouble together. But one of the powerful things that Michael's been doing is collecting objects that are sort of historic. They're cultural artifacts, aren't they, Michael? They're just that are going to help tell parts of history. So I'm going to let him say more. But I kind of, when I first saw it, I thought when you're in elementary school and stuff, you had show and tell, which was a little lighter than some of the stuff we're talking about tonight. But Michael, I know you're gonna. I'm not gonna let the cat out of the bag, but I know you've got something tonight you're going to show. But I had Elvis Presley's autograph, Michael. So I used to, bring that, and my aunt flew with him on an airplane, and so she got on the flight manual, his autograph. So the stuff we're talking about tonight is much more serious, and I think much more important and weighty than just Elvis's autograph. But to set the tone, I showed Michael these before we started. A good friend of ours that some of you all have known if you follow us on socials, Steve Shapiro, passed away last month. He actually died on Martin Luther King's birthday, which is just wild to think about, because he was almost 90 years old, and I got to talk to him just right before he died. He was so at peace. He smiled and he said, "Shane, I'm probably going to die soon, but I feel so at peace with the world." And he sent me these images. So this kind of like actually helps us center as we enter the conversation tonight. But he took this picture, right, of Dr. King, and mailed these to me before he died. And so I've got them here in my office, and this is a picture of Rosa Parks that our brother Steve took, and this is another Dr. King image. So part of it is that, as I look at these, I'm just thinking, he was there, like these are not just like things you see in a picture book on a table or something. This is history, right? And I think what we're seeing in our country is a battle over the narrative, right, of how we remember history. And no one knows that better than you, Michael. And so you're going to help us do better tonight and tell some stories. And first, just tell us a little framework of, I know you've got some stuff you've been doing, writing. You've released a children's book. So tell us what's going on, man. And then we'll just jump right into it.
Well, again, Shane, I really am delighted to have an opportunity to share with all of you. And thank you for sharing this space with us tonight. And thank you, as always, Brother Shane, for all the work that you do in the world to advance peace and justice. Really is an inspiration. And I'm very grateful for the sacrifices that you make and so many others to help bend the arc towards justice, because it does not bend itself. I've always been drawn to history. I've always been drawn to storytelling that comes from my family. I'm from a family of storytellers, orators, preachers, prophets, activists, business persons, teachers, who've always found opportunity to help the world come alive through stories that they told. So I was always drawn to it. In terms of my work in activism, service as a pastor, even when I am teaching in the classroom as a professor, I have come to find that object lessons are just as effective and just as important at this age as they were when we were younger. There's a way in which it allows the history to become all the more real. And you're absolutely right, Shane. We're living at a time where history is under assault. That's not to suggest that this is the first time that it's happened. Unfortunately, that's been common throughout human history, but we're seeing an absolute assault on the truth, an absolute assault on history and our ability now to teach that history to our young people. This morning, I attempt to preach from the book of Joshua, the 4th chapter, after the children of Israel have crossed over the Jordan River into the promised land. And the command is for persons to carry the ark back to the middle of the river and retrieve 12 large stones. You know the story, to erect them on the other side of the river as a memorial, so that when in future days the children ask, what do these stories mean, or what do these stones mean? You then were obligated to tell the story of how God worked in through the people to lead them to a point of liberation. And also, I think that is so critically important today, and it's one of the things that inspires the work that I do. And so, again, a very honored to share with you today, and I'm looking forward to sharing with you a few of the artifacts that I have today, these objects that we're going to share tonight, and looking forward also to any questions that might arise as we are in conversation tonight. So again, grateful for this opportunity. I'm also want to acknowledge the Emerson Collective, of which I am now a fellow, and thankful for their support of my work as I'm seeking to build and research around storytelling and democracy. So definitely want to provide a nod to them and thankful for that support. Also, I am honored to teach an online class called Makes Me Want to Holler, Race in America, and have been engaging organizations and congregations all across the country in a deep dive of American history so that we can emerge as anti-racist. It's been really an amazing process, whether it be congregations, whether it be national orgs, whether it be even school districts, to really unpack this history and to really discover how history is really present with us today, how it's really informing and impacting the things that are happening in our country right now. Always want to let you know a few resources. I'm honored to be an author like Shane, and some of those resources are available at my website and others, whether I wrote them myself or contributed a chapter or forward to. I saw in the chat a very dear sister has joined us tonight, the Reverend Sharon Risher. You see her book there, For Such a Time as This, Hope and Forgiveness After the Charleston Massacre. I had the honor of writing the forward to that book and the additional honor of being alongside her in Manhattan when that book appeared on the Today Show and MSNBC Live and some other places. How to Heal Our Divides is currently a post on Red Letter Christians of a chapter that I contributed to that book as well. So if you're interested, michaelwwaters.com. I've recently wrote some children's books. That's what Shane is alluding to. Never in a million years thought that I would be writing children's books. But God, the Spirit moves in mysterious ways. And so I'm thankful for the opportunity. My wife and I are blessed to be the parents of 4 beautiful children, and really our lives with them has served as an inspiration towards these writings. And so for Beautiful Black Boys Who Believe in a Better World was the first children's book. Essence Magazine named it one of the 6 must-read books about race for your children. I'm very grateful for the recognitions that it has received. It's an opportunity to talk with your children about racial violence, about police brutality, about gun violence as well. Supported also by the Muhammad Ali Center, which provided a education guide in the back of the book for teachers and for guardians to have a deeper conversation with their young people about these matters. Also recently just came out at the end of last year, Liberty's Civil Rights Road Trip. which is an early introduction to civil rights history for young people, also inspired by our children. Was just blown away and thankful for the reception received, particularly this month for Black History Month. Just received the 2022 National Council for the Social Studies and Children's Book Council Notable Social Studies Trade Book for Young People. So that was a great honor. And Twinkle is an organization out of the UK, and they named it one of the 25 best children's books about the civil rights movement. So really deeply honored, and thank you for your support. And if you're interested, that's available now. Now, also again, write for adults in my latest book, Something in the Water, a 21st Century Civil Rights Odyssey. The foreword is written by a gentleman who's currently running for governor of Texas, Beto O'Rourke. Thankful for the support that is received thus far. And I actually have a video I want to share with you that will, I think, help shape our conversation for tonight, the book trailer itself.
"400 years ago, there was something in the water. It was us, kidnapped from the mother continent. But you see, there was something else in the water, something toxic. There's something in the water that caused the lynching of black and brown bodies. If you came tonight and you are in pain, peer into the water."
All Japanese were required to move.
Shutdown of Muslims entering the United States.
Protesters at the Dakota Access Pipeline continue to be met with insane violence.
A militarized police force up against an unarmed, peaceful prayer force.
Looks like mass incarceration. Looks like children in cages. Peer into the water. Do you see it? It looks like toxic water in Flint. Looks like 9 black bodies bombarded by bullets in a Bible study.
These people were in church. They were in church.
It looks like Charlottesville. There's something in the water. Looks to me like Emmett Till. It sounds like Eric Garner. Don't let go of what you're feeling right now. It sounds like hashtag, 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 hashtag. There's something in the water. Looks like Selma. Looks like Ferguson. So we resist.
Protests breaking out in Philadelphia, Washington, D.C.
We resist. And I ask you in the spirit of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the time is always right to do what is right, and now is the time to do what is right. We resist.
We still have to grapple with racial injustice and a reckoning on who we intend to be as a nation.
There's something in the water. There's power in the water. There's deliverance in the water. All of these issues are connected. The poverty of our city, the legacy of white supremacy. There's healing in the water. So let justice flow like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream.
Again, friends, thank you for the opportunity to share that trailer with you. And really, a number of the things that we're going to talk about tonight arise from that work, that engagement with the arc of our racial history and what it means for us as a nation. So as Shane and I were talking, I said, you know what, I'll bring a few artifacts that I think help have the conversation about race in America. And again, we invite you to share whatever may be on your heart related to these items. So we're going to start with the Charleston slave tag. The Charleston slave tag. Interestingly enough, the city of Charleston, records suggest upwards between 70 to 80% of all enslaved persons who came to America, persons who were brought in chains to these shores, arrived at the port of Charleston. So Charleston was a major thoroughfare for the exchange of human beings, for chattel slavery. This arises from that history. I have right here, every image that you see, I actually have the artifact before me. It says Charleston. You see the number 52, 1856 in Porter, okay? Obviously, the name Charleston speaks to the location. 52 suggests that these persons were registered, right? So this was a official function of government to issue and to assign these slave tags. Of course, you have the year that's dated, which suggests that it was something that needed to be renewed, whether it was annually or biannually. And then you see the position there of a porter, right? The reason these tags were given was because it was illegal to be an enslaved Black person and to be present in society, to be present in public without the permission of your master. Some white person had to permit you to be present in public, right? There was always the threat of you running away, right? Of you seeking to be a liberated human being. There was always the threat of maybe some type of uprising, of you fighting for your liberation, right? And so this tag had to be worn at all times by Black persons as they were moving between oftentimes the plantation where they were owned and the location where they were leased to. Slave tags were given to individuals. And so what would happen quite often is that in a period of time, maybe when it was beyond the harvest time, to continue to generate funds, continue to generate wealth off the backs of the enslaved, enslavers would loan the enslaved out to do work, right? And they would work for someone else until such time it was time for the harvest to come in again, or time to work towards the harvest. Why does that matter to me? Why do I think it should matter to us? Well, interestingly enough, this past week was the 10th anniversary of the death of a young boy by the name of Trayvon Martin. You know that story.
Yeah. Hey, Michael,
George Zimmerman.
just real quick, we can see it, but if you, it's in presenter mode. So I think if you hit the full screen, it'll be a
I'm
little,
sorry.
No, it's all good, man. We've been able to see it. That'll just make it a little clearer. No, it's all good.
No.
Man.
Let me make it bigger. Thank you for letting me know. Is that better?
Yeah, perfect, bro. Yeah.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much. Thank you. So I'll go back again. So that's the Charleston slave tag. Thank you. All right. And then why does this matter?
Yeah,
again,
perfect.
It was 10 years ago, right, that Trayvon Martin was killed in Florida by George Zimmerman, wearing the hoodie, gone for iced tea and some Skittles. And to me, the connection of that history is that so oftentimes in our nation today, you need to be permitted by a white person to be present in public. That same type of permission to be human in public as a Black person oftentimes comes at the authorization of a white person. And if you are not authorized by them, then you are suspicious, right? And therefore, whiteness in this country means that you can always interrogate Blackness, that you have authority over Black humanity. And so anytime you see a person and you believe that they're not where they're supposed to be, you can address that matter, even if it means confronting them with arms, right? And so George Zimmerman felt at liberty, as so many others have felt in the past and in the present, whether they are members of law enforcement or not, to confront Black people in public, because if you're here and I don't know you, then you're suspicious, right? There's a reason you're here, and I need to find out why you're moving about in public. And so, Shane, I wanted to start there. I think to have a conversation about race in America is really to mine out that history, that even after all of these centuries, there's an air of suspicion that surrounds Blackness.
Yeah.
And in many ways, there's still that historical emphasis on some white people authorizing or endorsing your presence in certain places. I'll share this as well, Shane. When you and I shared this artifact, plantation police, right? You have one of these as well. This is from 1858, also from South Carolina, the Runaway Slave Patrol. The interesting thing I find out about this badge is that any white person could be deputized to capture and return Black people, right? And so white men in particular. And so I see that same functioning happening today. Oftentimes a feeling as though you are deputized to confront, maybe capture, and unfortunately sometimes kill Black people. Think about what happened with Ahmaud Arbery running down the street, right? And you felt this, those three men felt empowered and emboldened to confront him and ultimately to take his life.
Yeah, I even think of Jordan Davis, right? There's one story after another, right? But Jordan Davis in Florida, a white man, armed man, came and told them they were playing their music too loud, right? And then took it upon himself to actually argue that he was standing his ground by killing them, or by killing him, right? Shooting into the car, and all the manipulation, the ways that we've tried to regulate where people can go, from bathrooms to swimming pools to even sundown towns, right? Like, you cannot be in this town after dark, but it's powerful. I think the connection too between, Trayvon and the that tag is powerful, man. And for me, as I'm looking at this, Michael, my own history is growing up in East Tennessee, where I look at that flag behind you, and the Confederate flag in my high school, we were the Maryville High School Rebels. It was everywhere. It was painted on our walls. It was on our football uniforms. And I didn't even think anything of that till I came up to Philly to go to school, and I put my high school yearbook on the shelf, and it had the Confederate flag on it. My friends were like, yo, what's up, Tennessee? Like that's not about football spirit, But a lot of this is about, it's not just about old history. It's about where we are right now, right? And we've got these competing narratives. Even as I drive to the grocery store, I'm in North Carolina right now, I pass Confederate flags,
Right.
So that, and there's folks that want to argue that this is not a symbol of hate, it's a symbol of our heritage. But when that heritage includes, I think we know what that means. Yeah, but go ahead, man. Go ahead, man.
Well, no, and I'm glad that you brought it up, because the amazing thing about this flag is that it wasn't made popular until after the Civil War and even after Reconstruction. This flag becomes popular late in the 19th century during the lynching movement, right? During the codification of white supremacy that happened all across the country with Jim Crow laws and Plessy versus Ferguson. And so when people claim this as a part of their heritage, oftentimes they're telling the truth. But it's not the heritage that they think they're talking about. It has nothing to do really with the Civil War, because at the time of the Civil War, you only really had one regiment of the army in one state that was flying this flag. This flag becomes something bigger, becomes something that represents something far more grotesque, right? During that latter period of the 19th century. And so I think that's important as well. I want to share the next artifact here with you. That I think is just amazing and powerful. And please, if you have anything to ask, anything to contribute, comment, please put in the chat or in the comments. This is, looking to expand our conversation together. But this is some Confederate money from Richmond, okay? And I just find it to be so fascinating, particularly given the conversations that people have concerning whose country this is and who contributed to the upbuilding of that country, right? It's very clear. There's one image that jumps right off the page at you. This was issued, as you see, December the 22nd, 1862. I have some of that currency here, Confederate States of America, all right, Richmond. And the fascinating thing is at the center, you see Black people working in the fields. That's not accidental, okay? Slavery as an institution at the beginning of the American Civil War was wealthier, created more profits than the railroads and manufacturing combined, right? It was in essence the biggest economy in the United States of America. Allowed us to really grow at a very rapid rate when you think about how young the country was. And everyone was involved. And I want to make this point as well, because so many times we talk about slavery, oftentimes people want to suggest, well, that was just a Southern thing, and it was really the persons in the South who were holding slaves. The reality is, just as it is true for mass incarceration today, multiple organizations, multiple businesses profited off of the backs of these people, right? So maybe the cotton was harvested in the South, but the textiles were made in the northern factories. And then ultimately you had this export that went all across the world. And so whether or not you were having persons who were in the fields harvesting the crop, persons in the North who were receiving it and turning it into products, people across the globe and the country who were purchasing products that were made, everybody participated in the slave economy. And that's a very important point. No one can just opt out and say, I had nothing to do with slavery. I didn't benefit from slavery. Not only that, but there are a number of organizations and businesses and schools that we still attend, that we still support, who are also built on the backs of slavery. If you've ever gone to Tiffany's and got that cute little blue box, Tiffany's was created off of slave money, right? Jack Daniels, if you've ever had a sip of Jack Daniels, Nearest Green, an enslaved person, was the one who came up with that recipe. But as was true for that time, you could not profit off your ideas. That went to your enslaver. And so Nearest Green came up with a recipe for Jack Daniels. Dan Call, who was his enslaver, shared that information with Jack Daniels, and the rest is history, right? When you look at the Ivy League schools, right? Brown, Harvard, so many other schools, they sometimes had slave auctions on their campuses, right? And the money that they received through the slave trade helped to build up now these internationally acclaimed institutions of higher education. Think about the banks, Chase and so many others, right? Who basically received profits from the slave trade. New York Life Insurance that built its wealth on insuring the slaves as property, right? So this was a major enriching reality. So much so that at the time of the Civil War, it was worth some $4 billion in 1863 money. It's $4 billion. Now, why is this important for me? Okay, why do I want to share this with you tonight? Well, I think it matters when you talk about reparations, which for a lot of people is a dirty word. They don't want to deal with reparations, want to steer clear from it, right? But according to Jason Heckel, who's an economic anthropologist who has worked at the School of London, worked with the United Nations, just a wonderful mind, who's written a book called The Divide. He basically calculated how much money would be owed to enslaved persons who worked from 1619, right, to 1865, right? He has a whole calculation and then put it in terms of the payment for minimum wage around 1993, right? Interesting system he put together. And he estimated that some $97 trillion is owed over that time period to enslaved persons or to their descendants, right? And so I think that's a very important conversation when you talk about whose labors built the nation and who has not really been benefited from the wealth that was garnered. I shared this, and I want to hear your thoughts, Shane, on it, but I shared this concerning my own city. I live in the city of Dallas, which I will tell you statistically is the heart of functional white supremacy in America. You can check out my book to see why, but I'll share this with you, okay? The Dallas Workforce Commission just came out with a report last month. And they said of the citizens who reside in the city of Dallas, who earn, listen to this, $32,000 a year or more, only 15% of the Black residents of the city of Dallas earn more than $32,000 a year. Now it costs, and the cost of living is going up higher and higher and higher. It costs at minimum $57,000 to live comfortably in the city. And yet only 15% of Black people and only 16% of Latino people, who make up 41% of the population of Dallas, earn more than $32,000 a year. And so I see direct connections between whose labors, whether it be slave labor, whether it be undocumented labor, persons who are working in the fields today and have for generations in other spaces and places, versus who's been enriched by those labors.
Woo! I got it. It's stirring up over here, man. I'm sure everybody else is feeling it too. And please put your comments in the chat. I was thinking, we read this book earlier this year, Reparations, Duke Quan and Gregory Thompson, and this was one of our book club books, and it's just such a powerful book, and I'm headed up to DC in 2 days to join Lisa Sharon Harper and a group of folks there that are going to be trying to get President Biden, actually by executive order, to do some truth telling and also a call for reparations and racial healing. So, I mean, this is happening in real time, right? And I think part of that is when you look at our history, what you're helping us do tonight is truth telling is the beginning, right? The truth will set us free. And so as long as we continue to bury the shameful parts of our past, then they, like Dr. King said, they're like a festering wound. They don't go away. They actually just keep poisoning us, right? And then so the truth is a beginning, but we know in the church, when you confess your sins, you also want to repair the wounds of them. We want to do something to heal the wounds that we've inflicted. And one of the things that is, and so I think there's a, financial side of that. If I got a car real cheap and then I figure out, wow, this car, my dad stole this car from somebody, then all the more if you figure out somebody got killed. I mean, it's not about property only, it's about people's lives and dignity, right? The image of God being crushed. And as I was looking at the images that we put on money, it occurred to me how good we are at remembering the wrong people in our history, on our money. I was wrestling over here because I was trying to find, I've got a stamper, Michael, of a Harriet Tubman, that you can turn a Jackson into a Tubman, right? You stamp a $20 bill. But, you think like, is Andrew Jackson actually a person I want on my money? Is it a person I want to remember as an American hero, or is Harriet Tubman, someone that I truly want to remember? And, I'm looking on the side of you there at the KKK thing, the outfit that you might mention, but in Tennessee, where I grew up, we had a statue of Nathan Bedford Forrest, one of the founders of the Ku Klux Klan, that was in the Capitol. This is a statue, a bust of I've seen it so many times, a bronze statue right in the Capitol of one of the founders of the KKK. It was there until this year. And Michael, even when the legislator had finally, after people went to jail for nonviolent resistance, after they're crying out in the streets, this has got to go, they finally passed to get rid of it. And then there was a historic society that had some kind of special rights, right, to protect the statue, even after the legislators voted to get it out. And you're like, we've been more committed to protecting Confederate monuments than Black lives. And as you look all over the South, you see all these memorials to the Confederacy. I mean, my wife and I just drove to South Carolina. We're seeing all these monuments to the Confederacy. And I mean, you don't remember 9/11 by putting up statues to the terrorists. You don't remember you don't go to Germany and see memorials to the Nazis. Like you see all these memorials to the lives that were crushed. And so I think, as you're talking about this, I was just thinking about how we've got monuments to the victimizers rather than the victims. And even when we memorialize the victims, like even as I look at that money, like it's not just about who we remember, right, Michael? But it's about who we erase and who we refuse to remember. Because it's like anytime we just remember Black folks as being enslaved or being indentured or abused or massacred, we're also, I mean, missing the whole other side of Black genius and art and scientists and music and all the brilliance, right? Because we're just remembering. So it's so complicated to like, it's like the statue of Nathan Bedford Forrest. Like, yeah, we needed to get that out, but like this should be a no-brainer. I mean, we got other work to do. I mean, this is like, I can't believe we're still talking about getting the founder of the KKK out of the Capitol, but that's where we are. Right?
That's right. That's right. And it's because those monuments were not erected as memorials to the Confederacy. They were stakes in the ground, reclaiming the space for white supremacy, the codification of white supremacy. As a matter of fact, the old Jefferson Davis monument that was in New Orleans that did come down basically said that the election of 1876 gave us back our state and made white supremacy the law of the South. That's was engraved on the side of it. And we know, just from a historical standpoint, the points in time, now the 3 times, interestingly enough, where you've seen this major push in the building of Confederate monuments. One, right, was following Reconstruction era as the South was being reclaimed for white supremacy. The next period of time, which is very interesting, it happened not only in the erection of Confederate monuments, but in the naming of schools, was during the Civil Rights Movement. During the Civil Rights Movement, you had more monuments that went up. And because there was so much challenge over desegregating schools, in that same time period, a lot of the names of the schools changed to honor Confederate leaders. And so in an interesting way, those also became Confederate monuments when you think of it. Now, the other time, interestingly enough, is the time we're living right now. Yes, they are still erecting new Confederate monuments right here in the state of Texas. So during this Black Lives Matter era in which we're living, once again, we're seeing the pushback against this fight for justice in the erection of new Confederate monuments. So much more I could say about that, but I got a few other things.
Yeah, I know. And you've been, there's folks celebrating in the comments, the statue that came down, the Confederate Memorial in Dallas. Someone, Betty, also asked about, what's an African-American family going to say to their kids when they're looking at these statues, and so keep going, man. So you've got a few other things to share.
Got a few other things I'd like to share and for us to have a chance to talk about. Interestingly enough, this is something that I recently acquired. It is a Hero Cross presented by the Knights of the Ku Klux Klan. Okay, on one side of it, you see, as you mentioned, Nathan Bedford Forrest, who's in the center, right above his head. You see the hood kind of descending down. You see 2 dates at the bottom, 1866 and 1915. 1866, of course, is when the Ku Klux Klan was founded the first time. 1915 is the second rise of the Klan. You look on the back of that Hero Cross, you have, the engraving there, Hero Cross, who was presented by, under the authority. There's so much that's packed into this, but I'm gonna try to move it along. Under the authority of William Joseph Simmons, who's the Imperial Wizard, right? So William Joseph Simmons in 1915 goes up atop of Stone Mountain in Georgia. A group of men accompany him. He builds an altar at the top of Stone Mountain, puts down a sword, puts down a Bible, puts down an American flag, and they worship at that altar. And he said he could hear the angels of heaven rejoicing. Talk about white Christian nationalism. Could hear the angels of heaven rejoicing as the Ku Klux Klan was being reborn. Okay. Now, the thing that's so fascinating to me again is that William Joseph Simmons was a Methodist minister. Okay. So this is very important, I think, as well to the conversation. With this is a man of the cloth who is presiding over an altar to white supremacy. So that talks about the ways in which the church has been complicit in white supremacy and racism, right? But also you see at the top, Whitehead and Hogg, right? Newark, New Jersey. So they were responsible for putting together these hero crosses. So you see that economy as well, that racism was not just this white Southern reality. There were persons participating in it all over the country and even being enriched by it. Okay. Now, the fascinating thing about this, and I'll hold it up in my screen because this is an actual hero cross of the Klan. What I'm showing you on the screen is what I'm holding before you now. This actual hero cross that I'm holding, the one you see on the screen, was issued by Reverend Simmons to the persons, the young men who founded the Klan in 1866. Think about it. There were still men, they were older men at that time, but when the Klan went into its second rise, there were still men present who were a part of its founding. And so this hero cross, this one right here, was awarded to all the men who were still alive to thank them and to celebrate them. And ultimately, this award became the top award that you can receive as a member of the Ku Klux Klan. And you'd have your name engraved at the top of it, and you'd wear it with your suit, or you might wear it with your robe and hood. But this was a symbol to everyone else around that you had reached the highest honors that one could achieve in the Ku Klux Klan. Why do I find this fascinating? Well, I find it fascinating for a couple of reasons, but one of the reasons that I want to share with you, the reason I find this artifact fascinating, let me press on to the next one, is the insurrection. Okay, why am I making connections between the insurrection and the hero cross? Well, it's all about the history that is surrounding the second rise of the Klan in the development of this hero cross and the narrative that was being told at the time. Okay, it's in the same year of 1915 that you have that movie Birth of the Nation, D.W. Griffin, that epic to white supremacy and to the Klan, becomes the first movie shown in the White House. It's the first movie that was viewed in the White House is propaganda uplifting the Klan, and of course that the celebration of that movie was that you're going to have these former slaves taking over Congress and eating watermelon and picking at their feet and eating chicken in the chambers, and you had this brute character, this white man in blackface, but represent a black man who's chasing this white damsel in distress through the forest so that he can sexually assault her. And in that movie, she becomes a tragic hero because she jumps to her death, right? It's to be a symbol. It's to say, rather than allow this black man to touch me or desecrate me, it's better to die. And so she becomes a hero, right? That energy, that fanfare, that propaganda results in massive riots and atrocities all across the country. White people literally leave the movie theater and go out and harm black people. They're so motivated by this. This then leads to the creation of the second version of the Klan. It ultimately leads up to the Red Scare of 1919. It leads to this transitioning happening in cities and state houses all across the country where Ku Klux Klan people are elected to office, right? All these things are happening, all because of a narrative regarding the country. It's also, and here's the connection, it's also the last time in American history that you had middle-class white people openly and actively engaging in acts of racial terror. It was quite often the case that it was going to be white persons of lesser means, the impoverished persons, who would be more visible and more public in their work. But this time period, leading from the 1950s to the early 1920s, was the last time that you saw kind of white people in mass of a certain economic background who were engaging in these atrocities. So there's a new article that came out in the Atlantic magazine, author by the name of Gilman. And what he noted in his research, which I encourage you to check it out. The title is Donald Trump's coup has already begun. The next coup has already begun. They did a study of the persons who participated in the insurrection, and it breaks everything that you think might be true, right? There was no commonality in terms of socioeconomics. There are people of all backgrounds, but this wasn't just about, poor white people coming out, okay? Mind you, interestingly enough, the people who came out, a lot of them were doctors, attorneys, surgeons, right? So you had persons that middle class or upper who participated in this, which is fascinating. The single thing that united the persons who participated in the insurrection was that they lived in a county or city that saw a demographic shift where they were increasingly becoming the minority.
Wow. Wow.
If you lived in a state or county where there was little demographic shift, or where say a Trump supporter was the primary political philosophy, you were less likely to participate in the insurrection. So I find this fascinating. That same kind of fear that we got to stand up and fight back that happened in 1915 is what we're seeing in 2021, right?
Yeah.
That saying we've got to reclaim our country. We got to do something about what's going on, because if we don't, we're going to be dominated by others.
Woo. Yeah, I think that when I'm thinking of the Confederate flag behind you, and just that, that recollection on January 6th of dragging that through the Capitol, with the Trump signs and with the Jesus Save signs, right? And that so much of this is about the changing demographics of America, right? And that those folks that have always held the power, white folks, especially white men, the demographics of our country are changing, the demographics of Congress are changing, demographics of the church are changing, right? And that group is slowly, or actually pretty quickly, becoming a minority. I mean, it's even in our lifetime that the younger generation will be a majority non-white. And you think that some of this, like Make America Great Again, it's not even really coded when it's really saying Make America White Again. Yeah. Right. I mean, you start to think, what era of American history do we want to, what's that golden age we want to go back to, right? Especially for anyone that's not white, right? And so I think it's so important to name that, the Charlottesville, as they're saying, Jews will not replace us. Like this has everything to do with the first Black president, the Black Lives Matter movement, and then you see it was already beneath the surface, right? But this like explicit, overt expressions of racism that are really unashamed. And boy, I just think of that scripture, that love casts out fear. And we've got to choose between love and fear. And the people that you think have no reason to fear, they've always had the power. They've got the guns. They've got, like why? But there's something I think that, they talk about in the Reparations book, Duke and Gregory talk about it. When you have a history that has secrets that you're ashamed of, there's actually a curse on the people who their heritage, their responsibility was carrying out that horror, especially the more that you bury it. Yeah. And that curse is insecurity. It's fear. It's this rage that shows itself, expresses itself in that kind of anger and hatred. And it's dangerous to all of us, so I don't want, you keep going, man. You got a couple more for us.
I appreciate the point. I wanted to say, when I showed the previous artifact from the Confederate money, which I think that the money tells the truth, that America, when you really think about it, it's a nation built on stolen land with stolen bodies. And that's unfortunate, but it's true. When you look at our foundations, stolen land built up with stolen bodies. Now, here's the other unfortunate reality. When white people are afraid, historically, Black people die. And that's just it. When they are afraid, Black people die. And so all of this, even among politicians, they're talking about, protect the border because the cartels are coming over, not people who are fleeing for their lives and seeking refuge in the nation, right? anytime you have this type of propaganda being promoted, it usually results in harm. Case in point, in 2019 in August, a young man from a northern suburb of Dallas drove 10 hours, 650 miles from here to El Paso to shoot 46 people, killing 22 in that moment. A 23rd person died some 8 months later, all because he said he was protecting against the Hispanic invasion of Texas, right? When you have that type of fear bubbling up in your heart, it can produce some violent realities. I'm going to go through these next two somewhat quickly because I do want to provide time for Q&A if there's anyone who has a question or comment that they wanted to share. But, you know, as we're in the vein of talking about a nation, unfortunately, that has been established with violence, and that continues to perpetuate violence, whether it be through the death penalty or other ways, or even to export violence. To me, this is a very important artifact. This is, and I have one here, the Stop Lynching pen from the NAACP, Legal Defense Fund, right? We think about the era of lynching in this country, that at its height, a Black person was lynched in this country once every other day, at least one, right? That's just astounding. We talk about terrorism as though it's always been a foreign enterprise, when in fact, the greatest threats to America have always been domestic. And domestic terrorism has a very strong root in our nation, right? So you think about the work of Ida B. Wells, the NAACP, and so many others who are trying to push back against this reality of lynching, of racial terror lynching, of people being killed simply because of the color of their skin. Now, why does it matter? Well, listen, we're in 2022 and we still do not have federal laws against lynching. For the last over 100 years now, every time a law has been put on the books to go before the U.S. House of Representatives and the House of Representatives pass it, the Senate continues to say no. The Senate will not allow there to be, even in 2022, a law against making it a federal crime to lynch a Black person, right? And this is during a time where there is a spike in hate crimes. When you look at the numbers against Asian Americans, right? And how that is spiking. When you look about the recruitment numbers in white supremacist organizations or hate groups and how that is spiking, right? That we've seen some of the highest numbers of hate crimes that we have seen in the last 12 years right now. And you ask the question, why hasn't this country received enough courage to make it illegal at the highest levels of the law, federal law, to hurt, harm, kill somebody motivated by race? Then I bring us here. This is my favorite book of all time, written by Reverend Dr. Martin King Jr. This particular book, as I mentioned to you, I own a copy that is signed by the author, Reverend Dr. Martin King Jr. I don't think, this is my own personal opinion, I don't think that we read enough of King. We hear his words, we hear his speeches, but actually read his writings. There's so much more to the man and to his philosophy than most people encounter. In this book, in particular, as he talks about his growing up in biography, I think it's very important. Dr. King talks about, and this is very important, that he was at a point in his early life where he almost resented all white people. That's Dr. King's words, right? He said he had gone past the places where Black people had been lynched in the South. He'd done that so many times. He said he witnessed so many acts of police brutality in his life. And he was at a point of saying, listen, I don't even want to deal with white people at all. And it's in his chapter talking about a pilgrimage to nonviolence that Dr. King impacts his encounters with Gandhi in his work and how it shaped his ethic of agape, of love in the public square, right? Which is very powerful. So I think the assumption is that Dr. King was just destined to be, was just going to always be this nonviolent champion for human rights. And Dr. King says, not so. I was at a point where I didn't believe, right? I didn't think it was possible. In fact, very much so creeping in my heart was a hate for all white people. And so the man we see as he progressed through his life was one who was impacted by this biblical vision of agape that was manifest in public. And I think that's very important. Now, why would I share that? Well, listen, this is the final piece. You remember this picture because it's of us when we were in DC, right? Why does it matter? Well, this book documents the struggle in Montgomery as they stood up to integrate the buses so that everybody could have a fair seat at the table. I think that's important because we are living in the midst of movement right here. And the reason I have this behind me, in my state, the state of Texas, it is illegal to teach young people that the men who wore this hood and wear this robe were morally wrong. Okay? In a school district not far from me, there was a debate this year as one of the administrators suggested that when they taught the Holocaust, they find resources that talked about the good parts of the Holocaust. Okay? That's what we're living through right now. Voter suppression is real. Voter intimidation is real. It's happening right before our eyes. Black people in America have fewer voting rights today than we did in August of 1965. I'm honored to serve as the vice chair of Foot Soldiers Park in Selma, Alabama, the very place and space where those brave, courageous women, men, and children marched for our right to vote. And yet here we are in 2022, and those rights are being snatched away. There's so much happening right now. And so the same courage and engagement and consistency that the people had of our ancestors is the same we must have right now. It's not going to be won, Brother Shane. We're not going to win this on Twitter.
No, on Twitter,
You can share all the articles you want to share on Facebook. That's not where the rubber hits the road. Do it. We got to get the word out there, invite people. But this, justice is a contact sport. You got to get in it. And that's the way that we win. And so, when I read the works of Dr. King and think about those men, women, and children who sacrificed so greatly for us to have what we have today, it beckons me to say, what am I doing in my own time to be a part of the change that's necessary to leave something far better for our children than we have today? So these are just a few artifacts that I wanted to share that kind of arc over history. And I'd love to hear any thoughts that anyone has or any thoughts that you have.
Yeah. Whew. Feel like we got to breathe in after all that, man. Whew, glory. Thank y'all for, we're seeing everybody putting some comments in the chat. We're watching the Facebook chat too. So keep them coming. And, I told people in the beginning, I got Elvis Presley's autograph and I'll trade it for that book, Michael, with Dr. King's autograph. I'll trade you, man. No, but, I was thinking, I can't remember. We were having a conversation with some elders, some folks that were with Dr. King in the civil rights movement. They said, everybody goes, oh, if I'd been alive with Dr. King, they said, well, you know what? Whatever you're doing right now, that's what you would have been doing back then. If you're going to jail, if you're marching, if you're out in the street, if you're watching it on TV, if you're sleeping through the revolution, like this is a moment that we get to, every generation's got its own movement and got its own responsibility.
Right.
Justice is a contact sport. So I got that. Someone asked, what is the significance of your top? Judy asked that of what you're wearing. Yeah.
Sure. Well, today at our church, we celebrated Black Heritage Sunday. We've been worshiping, celebrating the diaspora all month long. And this is mud cloth. And so it was my representation. We all wore authentic attire as a part of our worship experience. And so that's what I wore today. It's one of my favorite.
Yeah, it's awesome. Our pastor this morning made the connection with Dr. King of all the other people that were in his life too. And I was thinking about that as you were sharing, Michael, is, he hung out with Gandhi and it really shaped his thinking on nonviolence. He rubbed shoulders with Rabbi Abraham Heschel, and those relationships. Thich Nhat Hanh, really stressed the importance of what's going on in Vietnam. And so I think it's powerful that those relationships shape us too. And I think that's one of the things that, as I'm listening to you, is that all of us, we got to be building these kind of friendships and relationships that get us outside of our silos. Because sometimes, like, the worldview that we grow up with and the homogenous circles that we are in, they have blind spots, and we can't see some of the water that we're swimming in. And so we've got to be in circles where, I think it's white folks, where we get into circles where we are a minority more often, where we can learn history from a different lens, a different perspective, because it's really clear that white folks and people of color experience a very different America, right? We hold different truths to be self-evident.
Right.
And so we've got to be learning from each other. We just a few minutes left. Anything else, that as you're looking at the chat or you're thinking on what's next, Michael, that we can be supporting and joining you in?
Sure. Well, again, it's been a joy today. And I was just thinking about LBJ's very powerful quote that he shared with Bill Moyers, or Bill Moyers shared that quote later on, that LBJ, and I'll paraphrase, basically said, if you could convince the lowest white man that he's greater than a black man, basically you can steal from his pockets and he'll applaud you. And I find that so fascinating within our country. When you look at the plight of poor white people across this country, but you look at their voting record, they consistently vote for policies and people who harm them rather than for policies and people who will help their families thrive. I think it's just a shame before God when you think about the COVID pandemic and the numbers of those who were failed by the virus, and how many of those were white people living in rural contexts, right? Injecting themselves with medication that was set aside for animals because they've been listening to a cycle and propaganda that told them don't get the vaccine, while the same people who are questioning the vaccine are getting it themselves.
Yes, right.
And they're dying. And they're still going to support certain candidates and certain policies, because more important, interestingly enough, than their ability to thrive and live in liberation is this notion of whiteness. Just fascinating. And so, when you talk about the work of Bishop Barber, Poor People's Campaign, right? This idea of fusion politics. Yeah. I think that's so very important that we're able to align people together who have common experience to join in a common cause. I do think that's where our victory will ultimately lie. But it really is troubling to see how impactful it is. And I don't think we talk about this enough. Dr. King talked about it as well, basically in the same book, Stride Toward Freedom, how white supremacy, how racism does not just impact Black people, brown people, indigenous people, Asian people. It impacts white people too. If nothing else, as the great Ruby Sales would say, it will impact your soul, impacts your spirit. Mrs. Dr. Sales and I were on a panel a few years ago in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, and we were sitting kind of on opposite sides of the panel, a 3-person panel, along with Robert Jones, who you're going to have on with you. It was 3 of us in conversation together. And she and I kind of went back and forth because I was emphasizing, and then maybe it's part of my work incarnationally, I was emphasizing the bodies. I was saying that the bodies will tell us where the truth is. We have to find the bodies. One of the stories that I shared was from Freedom Summer in 1964, when Cheney, Goodman, and Schwerner go missing in Philadelphia, Mississippi. And that the FBI goes and search for those men, knowing they're probably already dead. And in the process of searching for these 3 men, they stumble over 8 other bodies they're not looking for. Yeah, Lord have mercy. They run into 8 other bodies of people they're not even looking for. So the bodies tell the truth. But then Miss Els tells me, well, Michael, what about the spirit? And she asked a question, white people, where does it hurt? That's her words, right? Because you got to be hurting somewhere to inflict this pain on your brother and sister. And so it's a harm. Yeah. And until we are able, Shane, to see each other as intended, as sisters and brothers created in the image of God. Yes. We will continue to perpetuate this harm upon each other. And so that's why we have to talk about it. That's how we have to engage it. And that's why we have to be courageous to fight against it.
So good. Yeah. And we're not going to get our future right until we get our history right. And
That's
and
right.
that's why, and this isn't just about old history. This is about what's happening right now. I mean, history's still reliving itself in our streets right now. And I'm going to bring it back to you to send us out in just a second, Michael. But I want to say, you know, as I'm thinking about what's happening right now too, I mean, heavy on my heart are the executions that are lined up right around Easter. You know, here we
Yeah.
are gathering around the executed and risen Savior. And then some of these same governors that are in church on Easter are going to be signing death warrants the week after. And one of those is in Texas. You know, if it goes forward, Melissa Lucio is a woman, Latino woman in Texas that's facing execution. And y'all, there's a film, you can go to her website, Free Melissa Lucio. But we've been working with her family, her children who were there when the incident happened. And tragically, one of her babies fell down the steps and died. And she was convicted of the murder and is now facing execution for the murder of her child, that her own children who were there and remember it can tell what happened. And so this is an innocent woman, a woman that's wrongfully convicted, that is facing execution. But there's even more, you know, and it's reminding me, Michael, that where lynchings were happening 100 years ago is exactly where executions continue to happen today.
That's right.
And the states that held on to slavery the longest are still holding on to the death penalty. They're still trying to erase that history. They're using critical race theory as this kind of shiny object to say, oh, look over here, you know, to avoid talking about the real history that we know we are responsible for. So join us, you know, as we continue. All this work is connected. Like Michael said, Reverend Barber, like we're going to be doing all kinds of things with Reverend Barber and the Poor People's Campaign over the next 3 months. Lizzie O'Harris, we're going to have them faith forum. We're going to have a book club, and we're going to be in the streets in June 18th as we march in DC. But we can't just live from event to event. We got to be organizing every day, all in between. And so you're going to see all kinds of stuff that we're up to at Red Letter Christians, but we're people of prayer and people of action. And you have blessed us tonight, my brother. Make sure y'all follow Michael. You know, he's humble, but he mentioned briefly that he's doing a whole class. So I know y'all want more. You can go to michaelwaters.com and take that course. Makes me want to holler, you know, get a few more hours with Michael. So check out his books, his class. You can, you know, find some of the links at RLC. We're honored to count him one of our subversive friends that we're organizing with. So I'm going to pitch it back to you, my brother, to send us out. And by the way, y'all, tonight was just a gift. And if you can donate, you can go to our Red Letter Christians and give what you can, but mostly share this video with people so they can hear Michael's heart and the fire in his bones and his stories. So thank you, brother. You send us out, man.
Well, listen, again, it's been my great joy and honor to share with you. Again, the website is michaelwwaters.com, michaelwwaters.com. We'd love to connect with you and continue to share and see what it is that God will have us do together to make our world and our nation a better place. You know, interestingly enough, in Philadelphia, you and I were talking about this, Shane, had the privilege a few years ago of speaking and doing some work in Philadelphia. And you know, my wife and I decided that we were going to take the bus tour. And so we kind of drove around the city. And as we were coming around the corner near the Delaware River, we passed a kind of a corner old building. And it was pointed out that is where my ancestors were held at the warehouse, that they were marched up from the river, and that was the slave warehouse before the auction. Now, interestingly enough, if you continue down that same road a few blocks, you would come to the house where Thomas Jefferson was writing the Declaration of Independence. That we are gifted with these inalienable rights, life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, endowed by our Creator. And you know, Shane, when I thought about it, I said the same road where those beautiful words were penned is the same road where my ancestors were marched up and down in chains. And unfortunately, friends, that is an image of the hypocrisy of our nation.
Yeah.
To verbalize a reality that was not manifest in real time.
Mm.
And so it's incumbent upon all of us to close that gap through our courageous work together so that truly we can celebrate all people endowed by their Creator with rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I believe we can get there if we work together. The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice, but only if you bend it. We've got to be in the work of bending that arc towards justice together. Thank you so much, friends, for the blessing of your time.
Amen. Bend the arc. Let's do it, y'all. Bless you. Thank y'all for joining tonight. Thank you, Brother Michael. And we will see